Hello, Griffins. Welcome back. Today I thought I'd do something a little bit different than a Zoom meeting. Rather than presenting on the different components that make up a computer, I thought it'd be a little bit more interesting if we actually tore a computer apart. And that way I can identify some of the different components of a computer. So let's dive right in. All right, here we just have a standard HP laptop here. Looks like one of the legs fell off. First, what we have to do to get inside is to remove this back casing here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick. Just a few screws on this bottom casing, and we should be able to. We should be into the laptop. Don't try this at home. This is an old laptop, and I've kind of taken it apart several times trying to fix it. Unfortunately, it does not seem to work at all anymore. But don't try this at home. This is just a demonstration just to show you guys what the insides of a laptop look like, and also some of the components in not just a laptop, but the similarities between a laptop and an actual desktop computer and other computers like that. So you're just about in here. Just one more screw right here. Right, and then this is actually clipped in, so we're gonna have to kind of give it a little bit of brute force to get in. Just open up those clips there. There we go. Pop that bottom casing out, and then here we are presented with the inside of the laptop. So right away we have the hard drive right here. So let's go ahead and take this guy out. Just a couple of screws here. And then it's also clipped here into the motherboard, which we'll talk about in a minute. All right, so I should be able to lift this guy out here. All right, so this is the hard drive. So this is a 1 terabyte hard drive. That's not a bad, that's a pretty big size. And what a hard drive is, it stores all of the data that needs to be retrieved later on. So this would have all of your files, all of your information for your programs, anything you download from the internet, any files from there would be on this hard drive as well. I like to compare the hard drive to the long-term memory in our brain. Similarly, if a computer needs to store something for later, they will store it here on the hard drive. Similar to how we need to store important memories, we need to remember how to do things, hard drive is the same way. So now we're going to go ahead and take this little casing off here. All right, right here we have the RAM memory, or random access memory. I consider this to be similar to how our short-term memory works, where throughout the day we'll gather kind of different bits and pieces of memories throughout our day, and then later on we'll store that in our brain so we can remember how it happened later. Similarly, computers use RAM to access data that they need right away. So hard drives are actually quite a bit slower than a memory held in RAM, or a random access memory. And so if a computer is having to do a lot of calculations and using the same amount of data, it's a lot quicker for it to store it here in the RAM. So that way it doesn't have to keep trying to find it on a hard disk, on a hard drive. And so that's why I like to compare RAM to short-term memory, is because it's quicker to access, and this particular one is actually 8 gigabytes. It's an 8 gigabyte stick. So there's two of them. So there's going to be about 16 gigabytes of data of RAM. And basically, the higher the number of RAM you have, the quicker the program, or the quicker the computer is going to be. So if you're playing a lot of graphically intense video games. The more RAM you have, the more memory the computer can store in the RAM memory, so that way it doesn't have to keep calling back to the hard drive every time. It can just store a lot of data all on the RAM here. So I'm going to take that one out as well as this one. There we go. So now let's go ahead and move on to the fan. All right, let's go ahead and take this fan off. Now the fan is important especially for what's underneath it. So let me go ahead and take these screws out real quick. And then we will get to why the fan is so important. I'm actually going to go ahead and disconnect this thing right here because it's kind of wrapped around the fan a bit. So that screw out of there. All right, so here is our fan. And fans are super important to keep certain parts of the computer cool. So underneath this this fan here was this chip unit, which I'll explain exactly what it does here in a minute. But this is known as the central processing unit, or the CPU. And as the CPU is doing different calculations, is running different programs, it actually generates quite a bit of heat from all of the programs and all the data and all of the electricity running through it as it does all of these programs. And it needs a good amount of cooling to make sure that the chip itself, or the chips themselves, don't overheat, and it doesn't overheat the other components around it. And so how this works is there's actually a piece of copper tubing underneath here, as well as this kind of sticky goo here that's here on this copper tubing on this fan part right here, as well as the chips themselves. And this gunk here is also known as thermal paste. And what it does is it actually draws that heat that these chips are generating up onto this copper tubing. And then the copper tubing transfers that heat all the way down here towards the fan. And then the fan will be, as the fan spins, it actually takes all of this heat and blows it out of these vents right here, up and out away from the computer. So that's why if you have a very intensive program that you're running, say a video game, or even if you're video conferencing or Zooming someone, sometimes you'll hear your fan kick up. And that's because the chip itself is actually getting pretty hot, and the fan is actually taking a lot of that hot air away from it and blowing it up and out of the way of the chip so it doesn't get damaged and it can continue to run safely and effectively. The central processing unit, or the CPU here, is basically, I compare it to the actual brains of the computer. So the brain relies on the short-term and long-term memory to control the different parts of the computer. So it might be controlling the screen, it'll be getting inputs from the touchpad underneath here and the keyboard in order to run different programs and run different things within programs. So that's what the central processing unit, or the CPU, is doing, is it's taking all of these different data and the inputs from the user and interpreting that data and changing things on a program, or running programs, or accessing the internet, that type of thing. Speaking of the internet, we have a Wi-Fi chip right here, and the Wi-Fi chip, similar to its name, allows the computer to access the different Wi-Fi networks that would be available to it right here. So this little tiny chip is the one that is able or provides the ability for the computer to access the Wi-Fi and get on the internet and surf the internet. So we're just going to set that right over there. All right, now I think it is time for us to start removing this big, huge board right here. So I'm going to go ahead and start getting rid of some of these ribbon cables here. And these ribbon cables just connect to different parts of the board. So you can see that this purple and black one runs over here to this small board over here. We'll talk about him in a little bit. And then there's this one here. I believe this one might run to the keyboard underneath. I'm not sure where this one runs, but we can take a look at that in a minute. We have some other ones here. I believe that these ones run up to the screen to possibly provide it power. So let's see if we can take that guy out. And then we have this one right here. So get him out of the way. And then we'll go ahead and start removing some of these screws so we can take a closer look at this central processing unit and some of the other chips and functions of this board here. Now this whole board right here is known as the motherboard, and it might look a bit different on a laptop compared to a say a desktop, like a big desktop computer. And the reason is because the motherboard in a laptop has to fit in a small space. So you can see that this laptop is fairly small. It's definitely not the smallest, but the functions of the actual computer do need to fit in a certain space here, whereas a desktop computer has a bit bigger area that it can use. And so a lot of the differences between a desktop and a laptop are mainly the size of the components. So a motherboard on, say here, a laptop is actually, see if I got everything off of this thing. No, we got to screw it there. The motherboard is a lot smaller on a laptop to fit in a small area. And on a desktop, you'll actually have several different boards. So you might have a video card, and you might have it is already still missing a screw here. Let's see. Oh, nope, there we go. Oh, we do have this connection right here. So anyway, a desktop might have a video card and an audio card and a bunch of different other separate boards. Whereas on a laptop, a lot of that has been condensed onto one or maybe a couple of boards. So here's the actual motherboard here. You can see all the different tiny components and stuff on it. So we got a few different chips on the underside here, some over here as well. We have some more chips over here. So again, this is the central processing unit right there. Still kind of covered in that thermal paste there. This motherboard also has some of the ports on this side. So we have HDMI, USB, USB Type-C, and then a SD card reader right there. This right here is actually just a battery to keep the time, keep the power on so it can keep the time. And I think that's the only reason they would have a battery there. So the different chips on the board besides the central processing unit, these would be for sound, they would be for processing video, that type of thing. So and these chips might have their own separate boards in something like a desktop. So you can see how small and condensed everything is. And I mean, this is a pretty good chunk here, but I mean, if you compare it to the entire rest of the laptop, I mean, we have the touchpad right here, that's bracketed right there. We have the underside of the keyboard that's running along underneath here. But I mean, in reality, this is all of this right here is the whole thing that's running everything that the person using this laptop would be using. And, you know, we got a speaker up here that's taking up a good chunk of room. Like I said before, this whole battery would fit right underneath here as well. So it's pretty amazing to see how they've been able to take all the functions of a computer and consolidate it down into something of this size. And then one of the last things I think I wanted to talk about today was what are called daughter boards. So this is a motherboard. Any other board that kind of connects up to the motherboard that isn't actually part of it are known as daughter boards. So you can see this one here. This one actually is for the power button. One input there, a USB and a headphone jack there, as well as the volume. And again, daughter boards are just separate circuit boards that connect up to the main board there. And of course, with laptops, some laptops and even desktops do have CD drives, DVD drives, but those are kind of getting phased out because of the internet. A lot of advancements in the speed of the internet as well, and cloud computing, which we'll get to in a week or two, have kind of made CDs and DVD drives a bit obsolete. But that is all I really wanted to talk to you guys about computers and some of the different components, just seeing what some of them on the inside look like. And we will see you next time.